morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
That's good. You can see I've written 5 sentences here on the board. Let's read them together, okay? At the same time now. Go to bed. Take the dog outside. Now, what do these sentences have in common? Let's look at them for a second. Go to bed. Take the dog outside. Stop. What are we doing here? Can you think of what's similar?
Request?
Request, exactly. They're all either giving a request or giving a command or that type of thing. That's what we call imperative sentences, imperatives. Do you remember last week we learned about declarative sentences?
Yes.
Do you remember? There are 3 main differences that make imperatives different than declaratives. The first one that we're going to talk about is the subject. For imperative sentences, the subject can be not visible. For example, here we have go to bed. If it was a declarative sentence, for example, you might say Tom goes to bed. Tom is the subject, goes is the verb, and bed is the object. But here, there's no Tom. Where's the subject? It's invisible. It's you understood. It's an understood second person subject. So for example, you could say you go to bed. But with imperative sentences, the subject is not always there. Stop. The subject would be talking to the second person, somebody you're talking to. So that's one thing that makes declaratives and imperatives different. The second thing that we're going to talk about is the verb. In imperative sentences, verbs often, they will always have the infinitive, the bare infinitive form. So for example, go to bed, go. It wouldn't be went to bed. You can't do that. It doesn't really make sense for an imperative sentence. You can't say, Will go to bed, unless his name is Will, in which case you could say, Will, go to bed. So let's take a minute and let's look at these sentences and let's find those verbs, the infinitive verbs. Do you want to come up and help me?
Okay.
Yeah, take the dog outside. Where would the verb be? Take, exactly. The third thing I'll mention about imperative sentences is that imperative sentences, you can negate them by adding do not. Usually that always works. But do would be an auxiliary, okay? Do not makes it negative. The one exception to that that's important to look at is when we have let's, okay? So let's is an auxiliary as well. So do and let's can be switched. Let's start at number 1 and look at this first. So go to bed, if we make it negative, it's do not go to bed. Okay? So do not go to bed. 2, take the dog outside. What do you think? How do we make this negative? Take the dog out. Do not go to bed.
Do not take the dog outside.
Exactly. Very good. So you add do not. And what I was saying before with let's, and you switch let's with do, instead of do not eat Mexican food, it's
Let's not eat
Very good.
Mexican food.
let's not eat Mexican food. So when you're giving suggestions, we sometimes will say let's. It can be a little bit softer than a direct command. If you're with your friends, you might not want to say, eat Mexican food, friends. You know, you want to make a suggestion because you're friends. So you might say, let's eat Mexican food. It's an idea you have. If you see let's and make it negative, it's always let's not eat Mexican food. Let's go to Disneyland. Let's not go to Disneyland, okay? So how do you think imperatives could be useful?
For teachers,
For teachers, exactly, giving instructions to their students. Any other examples? What do you think? For example, how do I get to the train station?
direction,
Exactly, directions. Now, what we're going to look at next is activity number 1, which is Simon Says. So for Simon Says, do you know how to play Simon Says?
yes,
You've played it before?
yes.
Okay, good. I remember growing up, I always used to play Simon Says. So Simon Says, we'll take turns a little bit with this, since nobody else came to class today. And I'll start, and I'll give you imperative sentences. And if I say Simon Says, you have to do it.
Okay.
If I don't say Simon Says, you don't have to do it. So, touch your head. Very good. Simon says, cough.
Simon says, raise your hand. Simon says, smile. Sit down.
We'll go on to the second activity now, which is a handout. Right here. Here it has a sentence, a number of sentences on the paper. You have to read the sentences. For example, the first one is, I love animals. The second one is, I'm hungry. And based on this sentence, you need to give the person advice. For example, number 1, I love animals. Let's go to the zoo. So you can use let's, or you can also just say, you love animals? Go to the zoo. So it's any type of imperative. We'll look at this and we will practice. Here's the handout. I'll give you a minute to complete that. Okay, did you finish?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'll read you the sentence, and you make the suggestion for me that you filled out, okay?
Okay.
So number 1 was, I love animals, and we said, let's go to the zoo. So number 2 was, I'm hungry.
Let's go to a restaurant.
Let's go to a restaurant.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
now, for activity 3, what we're going to do is called Dear Abby. Now, Dear Abby is a newspaper article in America where people write into somebody named Abby and they ask her advice. For example, somebody could write Abby and ask, Dear Abby, I really need to stop eating sugar, but I really love sugar. Maybe I should do that sometime. But and Abby will write an article in the paper giving that person advice. For example, she might say, stop eating sugar. Try drinking more water. You know, just little pieces of advice for that, which is similar to what we were doing. For example, we said, I'm lonely, and you said, let's hang out. That could be an imperative to give advice. So here we have a paper with some problems. We have 3 different problems that are Dear Abby articles. Now I want you to pretend you're Abby and give these people advice. For example, the first person says that his sons fight a lot, and you need to give advice on how their sons can get along, or how as a father he can help his sons. So please look at this, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Oh, very good. Now, did you have any questions about the Dear Abby assignment?
No.
Okay. Well, please hand it to me. Now, one thing that is really common for imperatives is when you're looking at recipes. Now, recipes will give you instructions, which uses imperatives. For example, add sugar. Mix the dough. So, what I have here is a cookie recipe, actually. And it's just an example of a recipe that uses imperatives. And what I want you to do for homework, so that you can bring it next week, is make your own recipe. It can be anything, your favorite thing to cook, or whatever you would like it to be. But write the ingredients and then use imperative sentences to tell me how I can cook that, okay?
Okay.
So here's an example recipe.
you.
Please read it over and ask me if there's any questions. So in review, today what we talked about was imperative sentences, which gives commands or requests or advice sometimes. So the three things that made imperatives different was the subject could be invisible. For example, you go to bed. No, we just say go to bed. The subject is understood as you. The second thing was that the verb forms are always infinitives. In the most basic infinitive form, for example, go, not went, not is going, but go to bed. Take the dog out, eat, speak. The third thing that we learned about imperatives is that to negate the imperative, we add do not, usually, unless it's let's, then let's not. Okay, do you have any questions about imperative sentences that we talked about today?
No.
Okay, well thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
See you. Thank you.